For over 100 years, we have been telling the wrong story about one of the most famous predators to ever walk the earth. Museums built it wrong. Movies got it wrong. Even textbooks got it wrong. And today, we are going to fix that one bone at a time. Picture the scene you already have in your head. A massive orange and black cat built like a lion crouched behind a rock. Its two enormous fangs gleam in the sunlight. It lets out a deafening roar, and then it leaps onto a woolly mammoth, sinking those teeth straight into its throat like a pair of daggers. That is the image Hollywood sold us. That is the image plastered across every prehistoric documentary since the 1960s. And almost none of it survives contact with the actual fossil record. The real Smilodon, the animal we call the saber-toothed cat, was stranger, smarter, and in some ways far more terrifying than the cartoon version we grew up with. So let us start at the beginning with the one thing everybody thinks they know for certain, the teeth. Those famous canine teeth could grow up to 11 inches long, root included, curving out of the upper jaw like twin scythes. For decades, scientists assumed this animal used them the way a lion uses its teeth today, biting down hard on the neck of prey to crush the windpipe or snap the spine. But there was a problem with that theory, and it is a problem you can see just by looking at the math. Those teeth were incredibly long and dangerously thin. A single wrong angle, a struggling animal twisting the wrong way, and those blades would have snapped clean off. Bite force tests done on Smilodon skulls actually show something shocking. Its bite was weaker than a modern lion's, not stronger, weaker. So how did an animal with a weak bite and fragile teeth manage to kill prey many times its own size? The answer changes everything about how we picture this predator. Researchers now believe Smilodon did not rely on its jaw strength at all. Instead, it relied on raw physical power in its front half. Its neck was thick and heavily muscled. Its forelimbs were massive, built more like a bear's than a modern cat's, packed with strength for wrestling and pinning. The theory that has gained the most support today paints a picture like this. Smilodon would ambush its prey, use its powerful arms to grapple and pin the animal to the ground, holding it completely immobilized, and only then, once the target could not move, would it deliver the killing bite. Not a bite to crush bone, but a precise, controlled strike to the throat or the belly, using those saber teeth almost like surgical instruments rather than crushing weapons. Think about that for a second. This was not a brute smashing through bone. This was a specialist, an animal built for controlled surgical killing, more wrestler than sprinter, more grappler than biter. And that leads us to another myth we need to break, the idea that Smilodon was fast. In pop culture, saber-tooths are almost always shown chasing prey across open plains, running down a fleeing deer or antelope like a cheetah. But the actual skeleton tells a different story. Smilodon had a short, stocky tail, nothing like the long, balancing tail of a cheetah built for high-speed turns. Its back legs were proportionally shorter than a lion's. Its whole body was built low, heavy, and powerful, rather than long and light. This was not a marathon runner. This was not even a sprinter in the way we imagine big cats today. This was an ambush predator, something built to explode out of cover for a short, violent burst, tackle its target, and end the fight quickly using strength rather than speed. It also was not built to fight fair, and honestly, why would it be? Nature does not reward fairness. It rewards efficiency. Everything about the design of this animal points toward one single strategy: get close without being seen, and end the fight before it really begins. Compare that to how a cheetah operates today. All speed, all open ground, a hunter that thrives in visibility. Smilodon was the exact opposite. It thrived in the shadows, in the tall grass, behind the fallen log, in the tangle of ice age brushland, where a 600-pound predator could somehow disappear, which raises an obvious question. If it could not chase prey across long distances, how did it actually catch anything? The environment holds the answer. During the Ice Age, much of the Americas was not open grassland the way we usually picture it. There was dense brush, scattered woodland, and broken terrain, perfect cover for an ambush hunter to creep close before making its move. Smilodon most likely stalked its way within striking distance, using the terrain to hide, then launched a short, devastating charge, using its bulk and its arms to bring an animal down before it ever had the chance to build up speed and escape. This was not a chase. This was a trap that walked on four legs. And here's a detail most people never even think about: the roar. That iconic roar we hear in every documentary and every video game, the deep bone-rattling bellow. There is actually a real anatomical reason to doubt Smilodon could produce anything like it. True roaring in modern big cats like lions and tigers depends on a specific flexible structure in the throat, particularly a stretchy ligament in place of solid bone in the hyoid apparatus. Some researchers who have studied Smilodon's skeletal remains argue its throat anatomy more closely resembles that of cats that cannot roar at all, cats that instead produce lower, growling, snarling sounds. So that spine-chilling roar you hear in every prehistoric movie, the one meant to make your hair stand up, might be complete fiction. The real sound stalking through the Ice Age brush may have been something far quieter and in its own way far more unsettling. A low, guttural growl creeping toward you with almost no warning at all. Now here's where the story gets even more unexpected, because the biggest myth of all might be about the animal's personality. For most of the 20th century, Smilodon was imagined as a solitary killer, a lone monster stalking the plains by itself, much like how we imagine a tiger today. But evidence from one particular location completely rewired that assumption. In the Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles, thousands of Smilodon fossils have been pulled from the sticky asphalt over the last century, and the pattern found there is bizarre. An extraordinary number of these fossils show severe injuries: broken hips, shattered legs, torn shoulders. Injuries so severe that in almost any other predator today, injuries like these would mean a slow, certain death by starvation, but healed. The bones healed. That means these animals survive those injuries for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes possibly years, in a state where they could not have hunted effectively on their own. And that leads to one of the most fascinating conclusions in paleontology today. Smilodon may have lived and hunted in social groups, and members of the group may have shared food with injured companions who could not hunt for themselves. In other words, the terrifying killer at the top of the Ice Age food chain might have taken care of its own the way wolves or lions do today. A wounded predator did not necessarily mean a dead predator because the group carried it. That single detail flips the entire image of this animal on its head. Not a lone monster, possibly a member of a cooperative, even caring social unit. Before we go further, if this kind of deep dive into prehistoric life is something you enjoy, now is a perfect moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There is a lot more of this coming, and you do not want to miss the next one. Also, drop a comment down below and tell me which prehistoric predator you want us to break down next. I read every single one, and some of the best episodes on this channel started as comments from people just like you. Now, back to the story, because it is about to get even more surprising. Let us also talk about where these animals actually lived, because the popular image usually drops them somewhere vague and icy, like a frozen tundra full of snow and glaciers. The truth is far more varied. Smilodon fossils have been recovered from what is now California, Texas, Florida, all the way down through Mexico, Peru, Argentina, and Brazil. This was an animal that adapted to grasslands, open woodlands, and coastal plains across 2 entire continents, from the edge of North America all the way down to the tip of South America. It was not a creature of ice and snow at all. Southern California during the last ice age, home to the famous Brea Tar Pits, was actually a landscape of savanna and scattered woodland, closer in climate to parts of modern Africa than to anything resembling a frozen wasteland. Smilodon thrived across an enormous range of environments, which is part of why it survived, essentially unchallenged at the top of the food chain for well over 1 million years. Let us talk about size, because even this gets exaggerated constantly online. Smilodon fatalis, the most famous species, was roughly the size of a modern lion, maybe slightly heavier and more muscular through the chest and shoulders. But there was a second larger species called Smilodon populator, found in South America, and this one was an absolute monster. Some estimates put its weight at around 600 to nearly 900 pounds, rivaling or even exceeding the largest bears alive today. This was not just a big cat. This was one of the most powerful land predators to ever exist on this planet, built less like a modern cat and more like a heavily muscled combat vehicle covered in fur. And it was not the only saber-toothed predator running around back then either. That name, saber-tooth, actually applies to an entire pattern of evolution that happened again and again in completely unrelated animal groups. There were saber-toothed relatives of cats that were not true cats at all, called nimravids, that lived tens of millions of years before Smilodon even existed. There were saber-toothed marsupials in South America, completely unrelated to any cat family, that independently evolved nearly identical giant fangs. This is one of the most incredible examples of what scientists call convergent evolution, where completely different branches of the animal family tree arrive at the exact same deadly design over and over because it works so well. So Smilodon was not some strange one-off freak of nature. It was the final, most refined version of a killing strategy that nature had already experimented with and perfected multiple separate times across tens of millions of years. There's also something worth mentioning about how these animals grew up, because even Smilodon cubs tell us something about this predator's lifestyle. Fossilized remains of juveniles show that the famous saber teeth did not come in until relatively late in development, meaning young Smilodon spent a significant portion of their early life without their signature weapon at all. That strongly suggests a long period of dependency on the mother or on a wider social group, learning how to hunt, how to stalk, and how to use their growing strength long before those iconic fangs ever fully erupted. An animal that takes years to reach its full killing potential is, once again, an animal that likely relied on more than just brute solitary instinct. It relied on protection, on teaching, and quite possibly on a family structure far more complex than the lone prowling monster of popular imagination. Now for the question everyone eventually asks: what actually killed off the saber-toothed cat? For a long time, the assumption was simple. The Ice Age ended, the climate warmed, and Smilodon just could not adapt fast enough. But the real picture, like everything else about this animal, is far more layered than that. As the Ice Age closed, many of the giant herbivores that Smilodon depended on for food, mammoths, giant ground sloths, ancient horses, and bison species, began disappearing in massive numbers. Some scientists connect this directly to human hunting, as early humans spread across the continents armed with increasingly effective weapons and coordinated hunting strategies. Others point to the shifting climate itself, changing the very plants and habitats that these massive herbivores depended on to survive. Most likely, it was not one single cause, but a brutal combination. The climate was shifting. The prey Smilodon specialized in hunting was vanishing. and a new, highly intelligent tool using predator was spreading across its territory and competing directly for the same food. A predator built for grappling and short bursts of overwhelming power against massive prey suddenly found itself in a world where that exact prey was disappearing, replaced by smaller, faster animals that its whole body was never designed to catch. Smilodon was not defeated because it was weak. It was defeated because its entire body, an evolutionary masterpiece perfectly refined for one specific way of life, could not pivot fast enough when that way of life vanished from underneath it. Its specialization, the very thing that made it one of the most successful predators in history for millions of years, became the exact thing that made it vulnerable when the world changed too fast around it. There is something almost tragic about that if you sit with it for a moment. This was not a failed experiment of evolution. This was one of the most successful predator designs the planet has ever produced, dominant for millions of years across two entire continents, brought down not by a stronger rival, but by the sheer scale and speed of a changing world. It is worth remembering just how long this animal actually reigned before that ending came. Smilodon and its relatives were not some brief blip on the evolutionary timeline. Depending on which species you count, this basic body plan, the powerful forelimbs, the elongated fangs, the ambush and grapple hunting style persisted for well over 1 million years, an almost incomprehensible stretch of time compared to how briefly our own species has existed so far. Entire ice ages came and went while this predator sat comfortably at the very top of the food chain, adapting, spreading, and thriving across an enormous stretch of the planet. Its eventual disappearance was not a quick failure. It was the slow grinding end of one of the longest and most successful predatory reigns in the entire history of mammals. So the next time you see that image, the roaring cartoon cat leaping onto a mammoth, remember what we now actually know. A patient ambush hunter hiding in the brush, arms built like a wrestler's, made for grappling rather than chasing, teeth that were not for crushing bone, but for delivering a precise, controlled killing strike once the fight was already won. Quite possibly a social animal, living and hunting in a group, caring for its wounded the way a family would. Not a mindless monster, a refined, intelligent, deeply specialized predator, shaped by millions of years of evolution, that ruled entire continents until the world it was built for simply disappeared beneath its feet. And maybe that is the part of the story that deserves the most attention, more than the teeth, more than the muscle, more than any single fossil pulled from a tar pit. For over 1 million years, this animal was not just surviving, it was thriving, generation after generation, across mountains, plains, forests, and coastlines, completely unmatched by any other predator on land. It took a shifting climate, a vanishing food supply, and the sudden rise of a new kind of hunter, one that could plan, cooperate, and adapt faster than evolution itself to finally bring that long reign to an end. And that is the real story of the saber-toothed cat, the one the fossils actually tell once you stop listening to the movies and start listening to the bones. If you made it this far, thank you for watching all the way to the end. That genuinely means a lot. If you learned even one new thing today, hit that like button. It helps this channel more than you probably realize, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Subscribe if you have not already, because there are so many more prehistoric mysteries, just like this one, waiting to be uncovered. And let me know in the comments, what extinct animal should we bring back to life next, right here on this channel. I will see you in the next one.